As we close out 2022, I find myself reflecting on all we have learned this year in the convoluted case of the Delphi murders. We received hundreds of pages of clients' interview transcripts and learned a ton of new details from the Ron Logan search warrant. New personalities entered the conversation, and of course, old and new rumors continued to circulate. There was a mysterious river search and even an arrest, but despite the new information coming to light, the case remains shrouded in secrecy and mystery. So today I want to take this opportunity to articulate my thoughts on where the case stands and explain how and why I got to this point. At the end of the day, though, these two are the ones that matter, regardless of what your theories and opinions are. It's important to remember the lives that were lost and all they missed out on, as they would be well into their sophomore years of college. Truth and justice for Abby and Libby is the goal, and we're just getting started. With all of that being said, let's talk about and define some of the main groups of thought surrounding the current status of the case. So if you've been actively following the case, which I know you all have, you probably fall into one of the three following categories in terms of where you currently stand with the case. So this first group, we'll call them the mainstream media group. These are the people who believe that Rick Allen did this mostly by himself. These were the lone wolf theorists, I guess we called them. They saw the arrest of Rick Allen, and in their minds, they equated this to Bridge Guy, because let's be honest, he does sort of look like the guy on the bridge. He has similar proportions, and an argument can be made to his face resembling, in my opinion, the second sketch over the first. But so this group of people believe that Rick Allen is primarily responsible, despite really no evidence being pointed towards him. So this is the group that also probably listens to Murder Sheet podcast and doesn't really dig past this media narrative. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we all have our own interests and lives and cases we choose to follow closely and not. So really, there's nothing wrong with accepting this mainstream media narrative. My problem is just the aggressive way in which it is pushed onto us. It's no secret, I don't like the Murder Sheet podcast. I think they're unethical in the way they present their sources, their unnamed sources. It's crappy journalism at best. But this group had to mend their theory when prosecutor McClellan suggested that Rick Allen allegedly did not commit these crimes on his own. So, with that being said, a convenient pedo ring was theorized with the band of misfits, including Ron Logan and Keegan Kline. So it's like this package of patsies that perfectly wrap them together with a nice bow that is the pedo ring. And that's what Murder Sheet and others have been perpetuating through, jumping to such vast conclusions that there's really no evidence to support. So that's one group. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with falling into that group if you have not delved deeper to the level that most people who come to my channel have. So the next group I want to talk about is a group that I found / kind of find myself in. This is the group that believes that the arrest of Rick Allen was strategic. This is where creators whom I respect completely and wait on their uploads daily, Clutch and Julia. Love these creators, and I believe, correct me if I'm speaking for anyone, but I believe this is where these two creators fall, that the arrest of Rick Allen has meaning behind it. There's a strategy in place, and we're just waiting for the strategy to become clear, and it will become clear. So that's kind of where I fall as well. But let me introduce this last group, and we'll go from there. So, like I said, we've got the mainstream media narrative group. We've got the This Is Strategy group who, they have confidence in law enforcement and they believe we're on the right track. Good. Third group, which I also find myself in, but I'll explain how I'm trying to introduce some nuance to this group. And this is the Rick Allen is being framed group. I fell firmly into the strategy group when Rick Allen was first arrested. I thought, yeah, it's likely that this individual is involved because I understand the scale and scope of this crime and that there will be many indicted. But once the probable cause was released, I realized that a narrative once again was being perpetuated onto this individual, rather than letting the evidence guide you towards the suspect. And there was also no mention of the murders themselves within this poorly written affidavit. So, like I said, I fall somewhere between these two groups, but through research and what I know about this case, I think I can provide a little bit of clarity as to my theory and how it all very well may tie together in a way that is not quite clear now, but let me shine some light and show you what I got. So what is RICO? The Federal Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO, law was passed in 1970 as the ultimate hitman in mob prosecutions. Prior to RICO, prosecutors could only try mob-related crimes individually. But since different mobsters perpetrated each crime, the government could only prosecute individual criminals instead of shutting down an entire criminal organization. Today, the government rarely uses RICO against the mafia. Instead, because the law is so broad, both governmental and civil parties use it against all sorts of enterprises, both legal and illegal. RICO allows for prosecution of all individuals involved in a corrupt organization. For mob prosecutions, that means that the government can go after top leadership as well as the hitmen, and RICO established much enhanced sentences as well. John L. Smith described the impact of RICO in an article for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. After RICO, mob families began to crack under the very real threat that members and associates could be indicted en masse for a wide range of criminal activity. Even the strongest stand-up guy would have trouble fading the 20-year and more sentences that began accompanying RICO convictions. While RICO was originally aimed at the mafia, over the past 37 years, prosecutors have used it to attack many forms of organized crime: street gangs, gang cartels, corrupt police departments, and even politicians. Another aspect of RICO is that if one person in an organization is tied to the crime, everyone may likewise be tied to that same crime. However, RICO does not apply to all crimes. A violation of RICO occurs when a person in connection with an enterprise engages in a pattern of racketeering activity. Racketeering activity includes arson, bribery, counterfeiting, distribution of a controlled substance, embezzlement, extortion, gambling, homicide, kidnapping, mail fraud, money laundering, robbery, wire fraud, and witness tampering. So as I stated, the RICO Act is quite broad and therefore allows for a variety of different organizations who are committing criminal and also civil offenses to be brought under RICO charges. Organizations from the Major League Baseball to the Catholic Church and even the Los Angeles Police Department have been brought under RICO charges.
Pilot you wrote.
I call it The Barn.
The Barn.
FX changed its title to Rampart when they were going to put it on the air for about 2 weeks, and then we changed it to The Shield. The impetus for writing it was mostly that, you know, I lived and worked in this city where this kind of stuff was going on. And I was sort of young and idealistic, and it was kind of shocking to me. Maybe I shouldn't have been shocked, and and it'd be tougher to shock me now, but at the time, to read about, the things that were being done, and once again, I just want to stress, it was by a very small contingent of the police department. It wasn't the entire police department, but this one small cell in the police department doing these things was shocking, and it hit close to home. It was happening on streets that I drove on. It was happening in neighborhoods that I frequented, and I just wanted to write about it, I guess, in retrospect, to help myself understand it. How does that happen?
In one court hearing after another, prosecutors have made a series of stunning admissions about corruption in the Los Angeles Police Department.
We have reason to believe that Officer Nino Durden testified falsely about the alleged narcotics transactions and that he witnessed and may have planted rock cocaine on this defendant.
Based upon our review, we are no longer convinced as to the legitimacy of the conviction, and as such,
prosecutors are filing motions to free prisoners and overturn convictions, telling judges that in the mid to late 90s, an unknown number of LA officers lied, planted evidence, and framed suspects.
The allegation here is that the gun that was located, or allegedly located on Mr. Madrid, was in fact a plant, and based upon that information, obviously the people are moving to dismiss the case.
Without objection, the writ of habeas corpus is granted. The conviction is set aside.
So far, 32 cases have been thrown out. 11 officers have been relieved of duty. More are under investigation in a scandal that LA County District Attorney Gil Garcetti says is the most important case his office has handled in the 31 years he's been a prosecutor.
A line police officer goes to the very heart, to the core of the criminal justice system. 99% of your cases, maybe that's an exaggeration, 90% at least, of your cases rely on the veracity of your police officer. If you cannot trust your police officer, you don't have a case. You don't have a criminal justice system.
The scandal now tearing at the criminal justice system was launched by the confessions of a former cop, Rafael Perez. Charged with stealing and selling 8 pounds of cocaine in 1998, Perez has implicated himself and other officers in order to reduce a possible 14-year sentence, according to LA Police Chief Bernard Parks.
On the criminal side, he's acknowledged that 57 cases involving 99 suspects are tainted either by perjured testimony, falsification of evidence, or probable cause.
So I bring this particular example up to show how broad the RICO Act actually is, and that it's not just for mobsters and gangsters like it was originally intended to, make prosecution of organized crime a lot more efficient and kind of nip it in the bud rather than just going after, the hitmen or even just the people at the top. It really makes sure that everybody is held accountable within that criminal enterprise. So in this particular example, the LAPD is seen as the racketeering enterprise, which I think is interesting and just shows really how broad the act is. And, as long as there's evidence of the offenses listed under RICO, charges can be brought up upon that organization or enterprise.
In Miami, the discovery of a mutilated body sent investigators on the trail of a deadly cult. But agents found a wall of silence around the cult's members. Potential witnesses, terrified of reprisals, refused to talk. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It would take a massive operation involving 120 agents in 7 cities to bring down a deranged fanatic who believed he was God.
Yahweh Ben Yahweh was a black separatist religious leader who established his own cult in Miami, Florida in the early 1980s and over a period of years acquired a devoted following of several hundred members. His followers lived in a building owned by the religion and turned over their paychecks and welfare checks to the organization. Yahweh ben Yahweh appeared to seek absolute power over his followers, often with considerable success. However, later allegations by members who dropped out of the cult included widespread sharing of sexual partners among cult members, intimidation by the cult leader, and severe punishments for disloyalty. Friction with the outside community mounted, and in May of 1986, a group of Yahwehs, as the members became known, were attacked in a neighborhood of Delray Beach. In apparent revenge, a group of 8 to 15 black men returned in the middle of the night on May 19, 1986, and firebombed 4 homes in the neighborhood where the cult members had been accosted. Later, Yahweh ben Yahweh denied that any of his members had participated in the firebombing, and he sent checks of several $1,000s to the victims of the firebombing attack. Through such gestures and through the thriving businesses he had established, he won widespread support in the Miami political community. This is important, and I think this kind of coincides with Delphi when it comes to cults and political interactions. His program of investments in real estate and the fact that he recruited and apparently rehabilitated homeless and destitute members of the Black community in the period from 1988 to 1990 began to win local and even national recognition. Mayor Xavier Suarez of Miami praised Yahweh for the economic ventures that included a grocery store, motels, and other businesses. Meanwhile, however, a series of unsolved crimes in the Miami area had police puzzled. Several murder victims were found in outlying wasteland, some mutilated by having their ears cut off, and one murder victim, Aston Green, was decapitated. Later, the police attributed the ear mutilations to the cult after defectors from the cult claimed that Yahweh ben Yahweh urged them to smite their enemies and to bring him proof of their action. So this case is so significant because the state of Florida actually refused to prosecute Yahweh ben Yahweh and his followers for these crimes that an ex-member actually came forward and agreed to help the FBI determine that these murders and unsolved crimes were attributed to the cult. So the state of Florida actually refuses to prosecute. So federal prosecutors brought charges against the cult leader and members under the Federal RICO Act. And this was the first time the law was employed against a religious organization. Although at least 15 gruesome murders were charged, the complex case resulted in relatively light sentences against the leader and the 6 of his followers, with the other 7 being acquitted.
"11 members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang accused of running a racketeering ring, which included robbery, extortion, and murder."
Newsroom, the U.S. Attorney General just announced it's indicting the president of Modesto's Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, Randy Peachy, and 3 others facing charges for conspiracy to distribute meth. CBS 13 was there as FBI agents raided the Hells Angels clubhouse in downtown today. Agents also raided homes in Modesto and Salida.
President of the Hells Angels, Richard DeVries, was taken into custody yesterday. This is on additional felony charges, including racketeering. Now, he's already posted bail following his indictment by a Clark County grand jury in June. This was in connection to the shooting on the US 95 in Henderson Memorial Day weekend. Police say the shooting was allegedly between rival outlaw motorcycle gangs, the Hells Angels and Vagos.
All the defendants in this case that are currently before Your Honor today have been charged with racketeering. The Hells Angels has been deemed by the Clark County grand jury to be a criminal syndicate.
Individuals use violence, fear, and criminal behavior for their own personal gain, for their greed.
The Hells Angels committed acts of violence to maintain and enhance membership and discipline within the gang. Member Brian Went is accused of killing an unnamed victim.
So in the beginning of this video, I promised to tell you where I believe the case stands right now and kind of what's happening procedurally and what we can expect based on where things stand and the evidence we've been presented. So I do believe, and I'm confident when I say that Richard Allen, I believe he's being framed just based on the evidence we've been given in the probable cause affidavit. I think he's being framed locally by the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. They do have jurisdiction based on where the bodies were found. So I do believe that folks in Carroll County in a position of power in the sheriff's office and possibly even at the state level as well have coordinated this effort to pin this whole thing on Rick Allen. And I don't think it'll be successful. I'm not worried for Mr. Allen. This is a horrible violation of his civil rights, in my opinion, especially because the judge who put him in prison has since recused himself. So while I feel sorry for Mr. Allen and his family, I'm confident in his defense team, and I'm confident that the evidence against him will not be upheld in court. So on the other side of things, if it's not clear by now, I do believe that the Delphi murders at its core is a case about organized crime. And we can sit here and scratch our heads and think about, is this a motorcycle gang? Is this a cult situation? Are law enforcement members involved? We can speculate all we want on that. But at the end of the day, I think I can confidently say organized crime is involved here. And if I've shown you anything with these 3 examples, it's that it doesn't really matter what the group is. You know, whether it is a cult or a gang or a club of some sort, I'm confident that the federal government will come in here and render indictments to all involved, to all members of that club, whatever that club might be. I was looking, during my research, I saw in the news that an Atlanta rapper, Young Thug and Gunna, 2 rappers from Atlanta, were indicted with 56 others on gang-related charges, and specifically a murder from 2014, I believe. Young Thug ended up being the individual who rented the car that was used in the murder. So that was from a 2014 murder. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how long these charges really take to gather evidence and testimony and witness statements and all of that, and making sure everybody's in witness protection. And that would also explain why the U.S. Marshals were in attendance at the Halloween press conference. It would also explain why the FBI has not commented on the arrest of Richard Allen. So with all that being said, I can confidently say I believe he's being railroaded locally, but I'm confident that the federal government has got this. So that's what I think. I hope you found this informative, enjoyable, and hopefully you have some food for thought as we head into the holidays. I wish everybody a happy holiday season, and I will see you in 2023, hopefully for another crazy, exciting, and justice-filled year for Abby and Libby, because that's who matters in all of this.